All right, Joe, say good morning, a good tavach. Hope that everybody had a beautiful, meaningful, and uplifting Shabbos. It was a great zechus, Baruch Hashem, to begin another week of Bava Basra together, beginning by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Steve and Teri Czinn, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in honor of the birth of their granddaughter, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and in memory of Dr. Zinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Devorah Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, besuros refuah sheleima for Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach, ben Musha Chana, and commemorating her mother's Yahrzeit, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim, Dr. Moshe and Gavant, in memory of Dr. Gavant's parents, Yakov, Meir ben Moshe Leib, and Shena Bas Abba, and Dr. Behzad and Yemina Soufer of Los Angeles in the merit of a speedy and complete recovery, refuah sheleima for Esther Bracha Bas Chaya. Our week of learning sponsors, Judy Posner, in memory of Shimshon Laser ben Moshe, Chaim ben Elioah Cohen, and Daniel Yehuda ben Shimshon Laser Zichron Livracha, and Leah Soul in memory of Selma Wolf. May her memory be an inspiration for us all. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, all of the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should Meir Hashem return our hostages to their mishpachos, to their people, to their land. B'shalom and b'karov, our holy soldiers should be successful b'chol ma'aseh yedayim, and it should be a week of besuros tovos for Am Yisroel. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. So Baruch Hashem, today's daf is Kuf Lamed Ches 138. We are picking up on Kuf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis 137b, 4 lines up from the bottom. Am Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, a lot of incredible cases today. We're coming tomorrow. We'll close out the parak in Yahrzeit Hashem. So Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, Hakol Seif Nechasav La'achar Va'amar Halo Ef Shibahen. An interesting case. Right, so Reuven goes ahead and writes his property. Goes ahead and he's gifting his property to Shimon. Shimon says, now he's doing this in document form, he's writing it. And Shimon says, no thank you. I don't want it. You have Shibahen. So what's the halacha? Kana v'afilu omi v'tzalach. This is a fascinating halacha. So Shmuel says that Shimon acquires the property even if he's standing up and objecting, I don't want it. Shmuel says that halacha l'maisa, he still acquires it. Now, again, we'll have to see exactly what the parameters of this case are, but it's fascinating. So we'll say, so again, that's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, last line on Kuf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, Rabbi Yochanan says, lo kana. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, listen, if Reuven wants to gift something to Shimon, but Shimon goes ahead and says, I don't want it, then Shimon does not acquire it. All right, so let's analyze this. Am Rabbi Abba bar Mamel. Rabbi Abba bar Mamel said as follows: V'lo pligi. They're really not disagreeing with each other. How so? Top of Kuf Lamed Ches 138a. Kan b'tzavach meikara. Kan b'shosek meikara u'lebasof tzavach. So Rabbi Abba bar Mamel is saying it's referring to 2 cases. One case is talking about where Shimon objects from the beginning. Shimon objects from the beginning. So again, everyone will agree that halacha l'maisa, if Shimon objects from the beginning, he does not acquire the gift. So Reuven wants to go ahead and convey property to Shimon. From the inception of this gift, Shimon says, I don't want it. So the halacha is Shimon doesn't acquire it. So what's the case? What's the machlokes case? Or I should say, there's no machlokes case. What's the second case? The second case is where Shimon goes ahead and at first is silent, and then only later on objects. So the issue over here is, since he was silent at the beginning, that signals his acquiescence. Therefore, he acquires it. Now, both say, after Shimon acquires it, could he divest himself of this property? The answer is yes, but it requires a formal mechanism. So we'll say, in general, you could get rid of stuff, but saying I don't want something is not enough to go ahead and remove your ownership. You have to go ahead and engage in some type of process. So therefore, the Gemara says over here like this: they're really not disagreeing. So Reuven says to Shimon, "I'm giving you." Right? Reuven writes the document, so I'm conveying property to you. So when Shimon goes ahead and says from the beginning, "I don't want it," so again he doesn't acquire it. But if halacha l'maisa, he's silent, and then he goes ahead and verbalizes his objection. So again, he acquired it already. Once he acquired it, in order to divest himself from from ownership, what could he do? Again, he can make it hefker, he could do something else, but just simply saying, I don't want it, is not enough to remove it from his possession. I will say, there is a tremendous, if you take a look at Rashi for just a moment, the Rashbam, first Rashbam, Kuflam Chesed Aleph, Kam B'Tzavach Meikara, Netchila Kishamasar Lo Ze Es Hashtar, His Chil Tzavach. So case number one is where Reuven gives Shimon the document, and for the moment that Shimon receives, he's like, no, I don't want it. I don't want it. Hilchach, lo kana. Shin mizakin lo adam bal karcho, t'chofu lo, t'chsiv, sonei matanos yichya. So we'll say, so again, obviously if Shimon doesn't want it, right? If Shimon doesn't want it, then halacha l'maisa again, it's not beneficial to him. If it's not beneficial to him, you can't force someone to acquire something. Now, why would this not be beneficial for Shimon? Why would it not be beneficial? Because Sonei Matanos Yichya quotes the pasuk over here from Mishlei, he who despises gifts will live a long life. We know, we'll say, what does that mean? Everybody likes gifts. Gifts are nice. So the Shalom Melech is pointing out what's the danger of gifts. The danger of gifts is that they often come with strings attached or with other expectations. Sometimes in life it's better to do without the gifts and without the additional expectations and strings as well. In any event, so if Shimon goes ahead and says, I don't want it, then he doesn't acquire it. He goes on, atzmo lo taxir. So we'll say, so this Rashbam highlights something very interesting. So let's play this out. So Reuven wants to give the property to Shimon. He writes a document. He's about to give it to Shimon. Shimon says, no, thank you. So what's the halacha? Straightforward. Okay, Shimon says, no, thank you. He doesn't acquire it. What happens to the property afterwards? So we'll say, get ready for this. This is incredible. Rabbi Abba Mar Mamel is suggesting that the property does not revert back to Reuven. The property does not revert back to Reuven. So what happens to the property? Look at the Rashbam. Last white line in the Rashbam on the top. Reuven doesn't get the property back. Shari silek atzmo mehem elahefkerheim v'chala machzik bohen zachabam kidarmina bekrisa. So we'll say this is incredible. So halacha l'maisa, according to our Rambam, this is incredible. When Reuven is willing to give the property to Shimon, so he's giving it over. What has Reuven effectively done? He's removed himself from the property. So when Shimon says, no thank you, what happens to the property? It's incredible. What happens to the property? It's hefker. It's hefker. So if Levi's standing around, and Levi's like, hey, I'll take that, right? And Levi goes ahead and chaps the property, it's Levi's. Now we'll say, we're going to see this concept is a machlokes. Not everybody agrees to this idea. We'll see the other side, which seems to be the more intuitive side, is that no, Reuven's not making it hefker. Reuven's giving it to Shimon. And if Shimon says no, what happens to the property? What happens to the property? It comes back to Reuven. So we'll see again, this point itself is a fascinating and riveting machlokes. Okay, so therefore again, if Shimon from the inception, from the beginning, says no thank you, then Shimon doesn't acquire it. This little knetch over here, but it doesn't go back to Reuven either, because Reuven removed his ownership for it, and therefore it becomes hefker, and whoever wants to go ahead and get it, can take it. So the Gemara, next Rashbam, kan b'shosek l'basov tzavach kana. Now on the other hand, if Shimon was silent at first, meaning and his silence signals acquiescence, he acquired the property. So therefore again, kevan de kibal hashtar b'shtika nisras l'zakos b'matana. If Shimon accepted the document, if he accepted it in silence, that means he acquired the property. And once he acquired it, so therefore what? He can't rid himself from the property by saying what? I don't want it. I don't want it. He goes on, as the Gemara says, at that point, so if Shimon receives the document, he was quiet, he received it, then later on he says, you know what, I don't want it. He could go ahead and remove it from his ownership. But simply saying, I don't want it, is not enough to remove it from his ownership. What does he have to do? Either go ahead and be mafkirit, make it hefker, or go ahead and give it away as a matana. But there has to be some formal mechanism of removal from his property. I will say there's a tremendous Musha Chana skill in this. Before something is yours, mere objection prevents it from coming into your possession. Once something is yours, saying, I don't want it, is not enough to remove it from your possession. You have to do something. If you understand that this doesn't just apply to property, but it applies to life's challenges as well. A lot of times we encounter life challenges, difficulties, whether it's difficulties in relationships, difficulties with midos, difficulties with behaviors, and sometimes we just say, I don't want it. Almost as if I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to acknowledge it, almost as if by not acknowledging it, saying I don't want it, will remove the problem from your domain. Once something is your problem, once something is your challenge, the only way to deal with it is to deal with it. The only way to go ahead and remove it is by engaging in a process, pretending it doesn't exist, minimizing the impact it has on your life, just wishing it away is not going to work. Now again, that's why in life, it is so much better to be proactive and preventative than it is to be reactive. Because if I'm a forward-thinking person, I could prevent a lot of stuff from occurring. I could prevent a lot of stuff from coming into my personalistic domain. But once it comes in, wishing it away or saying you don't want it is not enough. Once I have a problem, once I have a challenge, the only way to deal with it is to create a formalized process that addresses it and actively removes it from who and what I am. Incredible. And it's only Sunday. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. Says Amram Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Second line, Kuflam Chesam 138a. Second line, Amram Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Zikal Aidiach V'Shasak. Listen to this. Ulubasov Tzavach. Okay, so now a similar case. Reuven wants to go ahead and give property to Shimon. He's giving it to him with a document. But in this case over here, the way Reuven gives it to Shimon is Reuven goes over to Levi, and he says, Levi acquired this on behalf of Shimon. So what happens? Now, interestingly enough, for whatever the reason, Shimon is there, right? So all three guys are present. So Reuven goes over to Levi, so Levi acquired this on behalf of Shimon. Shimon is present, and when the transaction is happening, he's silent, and then later on, he voices his objection to it, saying, you know what, I don't want this. So what's the halacha? We have now come to the machlokes of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanon. Disanya. Now, what is this machlokes? Here we go. Disanya. We learned. So let's say again, Reuven writes his property to Shimon and he's giving over his estate to Shimon and include his property. Included in this are avadim. And Shimon says, V'amr halah, I don't want it. Now I will say, the reason why the Gemara is pointing out, why does it say avadim? Well, who cares what's in the estate? So remember again, as nice as it is to receive property, the issue with avadim is a lot of care and a lot of upkeep. So Shimon might say, you know what, thank you, I appreciate it, but I don't want, I'm not interested in that. So that's why the Gemara brings down avadim dafka. But it doesn't, avadim is not the crucial part to this case. Point over here is Reuven wanted to gift something to Shimon, and Shimon said, I don't want it. No, thank you. Shibahan. So the Gemara says, Im haya. So I'll say, so now the shaila is, okay, so what's the ramification of the gift? Im haya rabban sheni kohen hare elu ochlim b'truma. So Tanakam, the Rabbanan say like this. If Shimon is a Kohen, so that means the Avadim are entitled to eat Truma. Now let's take a step back. When are Avadim entitled to eat Truma? Right? When is an Eved allowed to eat Truma? When he is owned by a Kohen. When he's owned by a Kohen. So this is very strange. So now Reuven wants to gift Shimon his property, and including in Reuven's property are Avadim. Shimon says, no thank you. So the Gemara says, if Shimon's a Kohen, then the Avadim could eat Truma. Which is another way of saying that Shimon has acquired the property. Okay? Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, no. Kevan she'amar halah ifshi bahan kvar zachu bahan yarshin. Shmuel says, no, that's not true. Once Shimon says, I don't want it, it goes back to Reuven. Now the lashon of yarshin is, and if Reuven passed away, it goes back to Reuven's inheritors. So I'll say, just pause. Remember again, here's the machlokes that we mentioned before. What happens when someone gives a gift and the recipient doesn't want the gift? Where does the gift go? So if you remember again, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel said, it becomes hefker. Because essentially when Reuven was ready to give a gift, what he did is he was masalik his ownership. He removed his ownership interest. So if Shimon doesn't want it, it becomes hefker. Anyone else could get it. Which you clearly see from Shimon says that's not true. When Reuven gives a gift, his intention is to give it to Shimon. If Shimon doesn't want it, then what happens to it? It comes back to Reuven. Okay. So we'll say, so fundamental machlokes over here between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Rabbanon they say that even though Shimon said, I don't want the gift, Shimon still acquires the gift. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, if Shimon says he doesn't want the gift, it goes back to Reuven. Va'avinan ba. And again, we asked on this Gemara of Tanakama, afilu omed v'tzavach. Tanakama, Rabbanan, it doesn't make any sense. Reuven is giving a gift to Shimon. The gift includes avadim. Shimon's literally jumping up and down. I don't want it. He still acquires it. other words, how does that make sense? That a person could acquire something against their will, especially a gift against their will. To which they must Rabbi Yochanan, no. But here's the case. Betzavach me kara dekuli amalo pligi delokani. So also we go back to what we said before. If Reuven's giving Shimon a gift, and from the inception of this gift, Shimon says, "I don't want it," right? And he's jumped right. He says, "I don't want it." Everyone agrees that he does not acquire it. Everyone agrees. Shasak. Similarly, if again at the beginning of the transaction, beginning of the gift, Shimon was silent, and then only later on he objected, everyone agrees Shimon does acquire it, right? Because silence is acquiescence. Silence is acquiescence, and therefore halacha l'maisa, he does go ahead and acquire. So we'll say, let's just pause here for just a second. Those are the two cases that everyone agrees with. Reuven is giving Shimon a gift. If from the beginning Shimon says, "I don't want it," everyone agrees Shimon doesn't acquire it. That's case one. Case two, Reuven gives Shimon a gift, and at the beginning Shimon is silent. Only later on does he come along and say, or later on does he say, "I don't want it." Everyone agrees Shimon acquired it. Okay? Lo pligi, so I will say, so where's the machlokes case? Here we go. Lo pligi dekani. Ki pligi, where's the machlokes? This is fascinating. Ki pligi. Shezicha lo ayide acher v'shasak ulbasof tzavach. Okay, so now we come full circle to our case. So I will say, so where is the machlokes case? The machlokes case is as follows. Where Reuven doesn't give the gift directly to Shimon. Rather, what does Reuven do? Reuven gives the gift over to Levi to acquire it on behalf of Shimon. And now, in this case over now, we'll say again, Shimon is present. Right? It's not, right? You think about this case, you think that Shimon's not there. Shimon's present. So don't ask why Reuven is using a third party if Shimon's present. That piece of information is irrelevant. The point is he is. Right? So Reuven is giving a gift to Shimon, but Levi is acquiring, Reuven is giving it to Levi to acquire it on Shimon's behalf. Now what happens in this case? In this case, while Reuven is giving it over to Levi, Shimon is silent. Doesn't say anything. But sometime later on, Shimon voices his objection to this gift. So what, in other words, Efshi, I don't want it. So what's the halacha in this case? Here we go. The Tanakama Savar midishasik kaninu. Tanakama will say like this. Well, since Shimon was silent, right? Shimon was present for the transaction, and he didn't say anything. Silence is acquiescence, and therefore he acquired the gift. Okay, now he's voicing his objection. Okay, you don't want it now. By the way, I will say, if Shimon doesn't want it now, then what's the halacha? If he doesn't want it now, what's the halacha? No problem. There are mechanisms to divest yourself of your ownership. In other words, go ahead, make it hefker, gift it to someone else. Again, you're not forced to keep it. There are plenty of ways that you could remove it from under your ownership, but you have to employ a formal mechanism for that. That's the Tanakama. Since Shimon was silent at the beginning of the transaction, therefore halacha l'maaseh, he acquired the item. If he wants to now get rid of his ownership, he's absolutely able to do so, but he must employ a formal mechanism. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Saba, listen to this. Hochiach sofo al tchilaso. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no. Literally again, hochiach sofo al tchilaso means the end shines light in the beginning, which means the fact that Shimon voices his objection later on indicates to us what? That he never really wanted the gift from the beginning. So what's the $1 million question? If he never wanted the gift from the beginning, then what? Then why didn't he voice his objection at the beginning? V'haidilot savach ad hashta, and the reason he did not object until now, the savar kilomati liyade mayat savach. He said, why should I object now? It's not in my hands right now. I'll object once it gets to my hand. Right? I'll object once it gets to my hand. In other words, so I say here, this logic, the logic is a little bit flawed, because remember again, when Levi acquires it on Shimon's behalf, it's as if it has gotten to Shimon's hand, because remember again, that's zachin adam shelo b'fanav. You could do something objectively beneficial for someone even without their knowledge or consent. But from Shimon's perspective, he's like this. He's like, I don't want this gift. All right, and he sees everything happening. Reuven's giving it to Levi, acquired on behalf of Shimon, but Shimon to himself goes, I know I don't want it. I don't want it from the beginning. But there's no point in me saying something now. When it comes to, when literally it comes to me, I'll repudiate the gift, so to speak. I'll go ahead and I'll say, Efshi. But for now, when it's in Levi's hands, why should I do anything? So again, just to be clear, Shimon's his logic is wrong, but the logic is understandable according to Rabbi Shmuel Silber. Therefore, again, when he goes ahead and he lodges his what's the right word? Not repudiation, but his rejection, right? His gift rejection. So we understand from the beginning he never really wanted it. So we'll say it's a really interesting case. So essentially what comes out is we really have three cases. 2 out of the 3 everyone agrees on, right? If Shimon doesn't say anything, if Shimon objects from the beginning, then he doesn't acquire the gift. If Shimon is silent and then goes ahead and objects later on, everyone agrees he does acquire the gift. The machlokes case is where Reuven is giving it to Shimon through a third party, Levi. Levi is acquiring it on behalf of Shimon. Shimon is silent at the time that Levi has it and only voices his objection to the gift later on. What do you do with that? The Tanakama says, you were silent, it's yours. You're silent, it's yours. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, the fact that he objected later on indicates he never really wanted the gift. Why didn't he say something earlier? Because at the end of the day, he figured, why should I deal? I don't have to deal with it until the object actually comes to my hand. No need to make a big deal about this until the object itself comes to my hand. It's quite incredible. Okay, so we'll say, let's go weiter. So fundamental machlokes. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, yeah, fine, good. Let's go back to a number of these cases. We'll say there's so much to say on everything, but there is so much to say about this concept of Shimon deciding not to deal with it until the object comes to his hands. So I said this actually over by Hashkamim this week, and it struck me. Avram Avinu, when he goes down to Mitzrayim, he says to Sarai, "Hine no yadati ki ishi yifas mara'at." Right, I'm coming down to Egypt. We're going down to Egypt, and I now know that you are a beautiful woman. So Avram Avinu was concerned because Egypt had a reputation as being an immoral society, and so he says now. So Rashi's bothered by what do you mean? I now know that you're beautiful. Avram Avinu didn't know his wife's beauty the whole time. So Rashi gives a couple of pshatim, a couple of different insights, but then he says pshuta shel mikra. He says Rashi's simple pshat is. Hine ata, I forgot the lashon of Rashi, but hine ata higa is lidog alzeh. Avram Avinu says, now is the time to worry about this. I knew this was an issue, but now is the time to worry about this. We have to deal with this now. I thought that Avram Avinu, Rashi and Avram Avinu teach us such a profound lesson that in life, there are things that are issues, and so much of like the art of living successfully is knowing what to worry about and when to worry about it. I can know that something is an issue coming down the road, but perhaps if there's nothing I can do about it, now is not the time to become paralyzed with worry about it. When I have to deal with it, I'll deal with it. Because if I start worrying about it now, even though I can't do anything about it now, it becomes overwhelming and there's nothing productive that comes out of it. So Avram Avinu was almost telling Sarah, I just want to tell you something. I've been thinking about this issue the whole way down. But I chose to put it in the back of my mind because during the journey, there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. But now we're here. Now we're hine na yadati. Now b'shas ma'aseh. Now we're about to enter into Egypt. So now, the thing that I knew was going to be a problem, but I couldn't do anything about it before, so therefore I chose not to dwell on it because it would just paralyze me. Let's deal with it now. It's this incredibly fine balance. On one hand, we have to be forward thinkers. But there's a danger in becoming too much or too proficient or too acute of a forward thinker, is that you could paralyze, the analysis paralysis. You could paralyze yourself by thinking about all the things that could possibly go wrong. So I have to be forward thinking, but not too forward thinking. I have to be able to say, okay, I know there's going to be a problem. It's not a problem yet, and I can't do anything about it yet anyway. But when it does come up, when it does become acute, I'll deal with it then. That's Avram Avinu. And apparently it's Shimon as well. Avram Avinu and Shimon from Basra. What is Shimon saying? Shimon's saying like this, Reuven's giving it to me, but right now it's in the hands of Levi. I know I don't want it. But the truth is, I'm not going to do anything about it right now, because it's not in my hands. When it comes to my hands, I'll actively reject it. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. Says the Gemara, Tanabanon, Shchimra Sha'amar Tnu Masayim Zuz Laploni, Ushlosh Meos Laploni, Fa'arba Meos Laploni. So we'll say Shchimra says he's gifting away his property. He says give 200 zuz to Ruvain, 300 zuz to Shimon, and 400 zuz to Levi. Ein Omrim Kala Kodem B'Shtar Zocha. So we'll say in general, we view these gifts as equal gifts, even though again they're written in a shtar, one after the other sequentially. We don't view them as sequential gifts. Rather, we view them as, what's the right word? What's the opposite of sequential? Concurrent. Thank you. Concurrent gifts. Right? They are concurrent gifts. Right? Again, just this, I will say, is the same way you can't say three things at once. You also can't write three things at once. So obviously, again, even though they're listed in succession, right? They're listed consecutively. We really view it as a concurrent gift. Now, why does that matter? Therefore, I will say it turns out that if Yakov the Shchimera goes, or just call him Shchimera dies, and there's a debt against the estate, and let's say again the creditor had a lien against this property, the creditor has the equal claim against Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, right? Because since they all essentially are considered to have received their gift simultaneously, therefore the lien against the property is the same by all of them, and they all share in responsibility to satisfy the debt. However, on the other hand, the ficha, good. Good. Aval, Amar, Tnu Masayim Zuz Laploni, Ba'achrav Laploni. But listen to this. But let's say instead Shchiv Meira said, give 200 zuz to Ruvain, and after Ruvain give 300 zuz to Shimon, and after Shimon give 400 zuz to Levi, then I will say those are successive gifts. And therefore, Kala Kodim Mishtar Zocha. So I will say, the earlier you are listed in the shtar, the greater your holding is. I will say, now what that means is, Lefichach, Yatzal of Shtarchov, Govim in Acharon. Ein lo, Govim Mishalafanov, Ein lo, Govim Mishalafneifanov. So I will say, the way that works is like this. Therefore, again, because they are considered like successive gifts, so therefore, again, any lien against the estate devolves first upon the last recipient. It's like LIFO, last in, first out. Right? It's not for the accounting reference, right? I don't know if there's such a thing as LIFO, but it sounds good. As I'll say, so what that means is, at the end of the day, is remember, so when you give the gift to Ruvain, so Ruvain gets his gift, the rest of the estate is encumbered. Shimon receives his gift, so the last person to receive his gift is the first person to whom the creditor goes. So therefore, again, the creditor first goes to Levi. If Levi doesn't have enough to satisfy, it goes back to Shimon. Shimon goes back to Ruvain. But he can't start with Ruvain. So the difference between consecutive gifts and what was the opposite? Concurrent, thank you. Consecutive and concurrent gifts. Good. So the Gemara goes weiter. Very interesting case here. Shchimira is on his deathbed, hence he's called the Shchimira. And he goes ahead and he says, give 200 zuz to my firstborn son, Kirailo, as is appropriate for him. So we'll say, so now you see the tension in this already. What is this? Right? What is this? Is this his firstborn portion, or is this a gift? So the Gemara says, Natlan v'notas b'chorasal. He takes this gift, and he still takes his bechar portion. In other words, this is considered to be an additional gift above and beyond his firstborn portion. Im Amar, the Gemara says, Im Amar bibcharasal. What happens if Shchimira says, give the 200 zuz to my son, bibcharasal, as his birthright? So then in that case, Yadu al ha'alyona. Ratza notlan b'charasal. Then the bechar has a right to choose. He can either accept the gift, understanding if he accepts the gift, that is his birthright, or he could say, no, thank you, I'll take my birthright instead, my double portion. So the bechar is right. So we'll say, so two cases. Case number one, Shchimira says, here is the gift I'm giving to my bechar kira'ilo. So then we view that's just a gift, additional gift, and the bechar still gets his pishnayim, his double portion. If Shchimira says, give this 200 zuz to my firstborn as his birthright, then the bechar has the right to choose the gift or the double portion, whichever one he wants. But interestingly enough, he doesn't get both. Right? He chooses one or the other. Similarly, Shchimira says, give 200 zuz to my wife as is appropriate to her. What's the halacha? Not lasan v'notal says ksuvasa. She gets the gift and she gets her ksuva. She gets both because it's considered to be a gift. Imam Rabbi Ksuvasa, if Shchimira says, give my wife 200 zuz as her ksuva, Then Abba says, so now the Shaila becomes Kufla Mechazor is 138b. Yada al ha'alyona. She has the upper hand. Ratza not lasan, ratza not ksuvasa. She could choose. So she could take the gift, or she could take the ksuva. She has her choice. Shemira Shamar. Tenuma Saimzuz Leploni Balcho Vikarailo. Similarly, again, Abba says, Shemira was on his deathbed, and he says, give 200 zuz to my creditor. Right? So Shemira owes Ruvain money. So he says, give 200 zuz to my creditor, Kirailo, as is appropriate to him. Not one, v'notas chavo. So we'll say, see in all of these cases, Kirailo, what does Kirailo mean? It's a gift. It's a gift. So again, the creditor gets the money, right? Gets the gift, and he also still gets to collect his debt from the estate. But if halacha l'maisa again, Shchiv Mira said, give this money to my creditor in satisfaction of my debt, then notlin bichovo. Then ultimately, again, the creditor collects this as repayment for the debt. If you notice again in this last case, creditor is not given a choice, right, between collecting this money or something else from the estate, which makes sense. A creditor doesn't have that level of flexibility. So again, if Shchiv Mira says, give this to my creditor, keroilo, then it's viewed as a gift. If he says, give it to my creditor, bichovo, then it's repayment for the debt. So one says, okay, let's analyze this. Mishum da'amar keroilo, notlan v'notla eschovo. So I don't understand. So the Gemara is most intrigued, right, by the creditor case. Right, so let's play this out. So Shchiv Mira owed money to Ruvain. So now he says on his deathbed, give 200 zuz to my creditor, kira'oilo, as is appropriate for him. So the Gemara says what that means is Shchiv Mira goes ahead and gets the money as a gift. The 200 zuz will be a gift, and he collects his gift, and he collects his debt. So because Shchiv Mira said kira'oilo, as is appropriate to him, that means a gift. As I was saying, I could have just easily said that karaylo means what? What does karaylo mean? As is fit for him, i.e., payments for the debt. So, but yet, interestingly enough, because he said karaylo, that's a gift. And by the way, that's the same lashon used in all of the cases, right? It's the same lashon used by the bachar, by the firstborn, same lashon used by the wife, and in all of those cases, karaylo means a gift. So what's the pshat? V'dilma karaylo b'chavo kamar. Maybe we just said, maybe karaylo means pay, right? Shchiv Mira says, give 200 zuz to Ruvain, my creditor, kira'ilo. Maybe kira'ilo means, kira'ilo as befits him, meaning as payment for my debt, not as a gift. To which the Gemara says, listen to this. Amr Rav Nachman, Amr Li Huna, Hamani, whose opinion does this reflect? This is great. Rabbi Akiva he, the Dayik Lishna Yisera. So whose opinion is? So we'll say, this is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva darshins additional shals. So we'll say, this is going to be a little bit of a blast from our past. This is going to be very exciting. We have this back in early in Basra. This is Rabbi Akiva. Now, what does Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva interprets additional unnecessary wording. Where do we learn this? This nan. Remember again, you sell someone a house, right? I sell someone a house. I'm selling Ruben a home. The halacha is what's not included in the home. What's not included is the bar and the dos, right? The pit, the water cistern. Those are considered to be entities unto themselves, and therefore they are not included in the sale. Now, to the point that even if I tell Ruben, I'm selling you my home, umka v'ruma, the entire depth and the entire height, it's still not included in the sale. The Gemara says, v'tzarech likach lo derech div Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva says, by the way, interestingly enough, so watch this, I sell Ruben my house, so obviously the halacha is I retain my pit, my bar, and my dus, my pit and my water cistern. But Rabbi Akiva says something interesting. Even though I retain it, what don't I retain? A right of way. And therefore, if I want a right of way, what do I have to do? I have to buy it back from Ruvain. Remember this? What was this machlokas? Mocher ba'ayin yafa or mocher ba'ayin ra. Remember this? Again, when you sell something, does the seller sell with a spirit of generosity, or does the seller sell just exactly what he needs to sell in order to satisfy, we'll call it the transactional obligations? Rabbi Akiva says, mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher. When someone sells, they sell with a spirit of generosity. Therefore, interestingly enough, as much as I retain the bar and the dus, I do not retain a right of way, and therefore I have to purchase a right of way from Ruvain. On the other hand, The Chacham say, no, you don't have to purchase the right of way. In other words, obviously, since I know that I'm retaining the bar and the dus, then obviously I'm going to retain my right of way as well. Okay, now I'll say, so just let's point out over here. But what everybody agrees with is that when you sell your house, automatically not included in that sale is the bar and the dus. The only machlokes is, do you retain a right of way? Rabbi Akiva says no, and therefore you have to buy it separately. Chacham say yes. Machlokes mocher ba'in yafa mocher ba'in ra. But watch this. Umod Rabbi Akiva agrees in the following case. Bisman she'amar lo chutz me'elu she'eno tzarech liknos lo derech. Listen to this. But Rabbi Akiva says like this. Rabbi Akiva says, if I say, Reuven, I'm selling you my house, except for the bar and the dus. Rabbi Akiva says, in that case, I have retained the right of way. Now, why is that? Now, watch this. When I sell my house to Reuven, do I have to say except for the bar and the dus? Do I have to mention that? No. Why? It's understood. It's inherent in the transaction. When I go out of my way and I say, except for these, Rabbi Akiva says, any additional words are there to convey additional meaning. So if I'm excluding the bar and the dus, I didn't need to do that. That's understood. It must be that what? I'm going ahead and retaining the right of way. So Rabbi Akiva darshans, any time you add in additional words in a transaction, it must be that you are conveying something additional. So because I don't have to exclude the bar and the dus, they're automatically excluded. If I go out of my way to exclude them transactionally, it must be that in that case, I'm retaining right of way for myself. Alma, kevan de lo tzarech v'ka'amar, l'tafuye milsa kasi. Therefore, again, according to Rabbi Akiva, anytime you don't have to say something, but you do say something, it must be that you're coming to convey additional meaning. I will say, you know what the sheet of Rabbi Akiva is? You know what it's predicated on? Rabbi Akiva sheet is predicated on people don't speak unnecessarily. Right? In other words, can you imagine such a thing like that? Can you imagine such a thing like that? That people don't say things unnecessarily. They don't say anything unnecessarily. So therefore, in Rabbi Akiva's world, if somebody says something and it appears unnecessary, that can't be. It must be that they're coming to include something else. So according to Rabbi Akiva, if I sell Reuven my house and I say chutz min abar ba'dus, that's unnecessary. The bar and the dus are automatically excluded anyway. It must be that I'm coming to retain right of way. Hachenami kevan delot tzarech v'ka'amar l'tafuye milsakas. So to over here in this case. So in this case over here, remember again, when Shemira is giving a gift, and Shemira adds in two words. What are the two words he adds in? Kara'ilo. Right? So Shemira says, I'm giving my Bechar this 200 zuz Kara'ilo. My wife, 200 zuz Kara'ilo. My creditor, 200 zuz Kara'ilo. Kara'ilo, as befits him, or as befits her, is unnecessary. I don't need those words. According to Rabbi Akiva, what do those words signify? Those words signify that this is a gift separate and distinct from any other obligations I have to these people. Right? So my Bechar gets a double portion, this is a separate gift. My wife gets a ksuva, separate gift. My creditor gets repayment, separate gift. So all of this reflects the view of Rabbi Akiva, that people do not, at least transactionally, do not use unnecessary words, which by the way, is true, right? How much time in transactions, right? In contracts, is used sparsing words, right? Identify which word is this, which word is that, which word, right? Because every word, when committed to the contract, could have a meaning. So Rabbi Akiva says transactional verbiage is incredibly precise. People do not use extraneous transactional verbiage. And therefore, if it's there, it means something. What is kara'ilo? Kara'ilo means when the shchimera is making a gift, that gift is separate and distinct from any other obligations that the shchimera may owe to the person he's gifting the property to. Incredible. Tanabana, let's go back there. Shchimera shamra mani yeshli eitzel ploni. So there's an interesting case here. So shchimera goes out and says, right, I have a mana that I owe ploni. Shchimera shamra mana yeshli eitzel ploni. Va'idim kosvim. Shabbos says, actually what it means is, the shchimera is saying, Reuven owes me $1,000. Right? Reuven owes me $1,000. Now what's the halacha? Ha'edim kosvim af al pi she'mekirim. So witnesses record this transaction, even though what? They don't know that it's true. Right? Just because Shemira says that Reuven owes him $1,000, that may or may not be the case. But the witnesses record this in a document. L'fichach, Therefore, again, when somebody wants to use this document to collect, right? So somebody shows up in Beis Din and says that Reuven owes Shchimira $1,000, whether it's Shchimira or Shchimira's Yarshim, the document has to be verified, right? In other words, in Rabbi Meir's view, if somebody tells something to witnesses and asks the witnesses to write it down, the witnesses will write it down, but the witnesses have no idea about the veracity of what they're writing down. They're just committing it to writing. So therefore, when you show up to Beis Din with a document, Beis Din has to do their due diligence on the document, because just because something is in writing does not necessarily mean that it has been vetted. The Chum say, no. In kosin, ela imkein makirin. The Chum say, no. You do not commit something to writing unless, of course, you know that it's true. Again, I will say, in the Chumim's view, the whole power of a shtar, right? The whole power of a shtar is that it attests to the truthfulness of the transaction. So if witnesses, if you do not know something to be true, do not commit it to writing. Therefore, lefichach, kishu gova, ein tzarich laviraya. Therefore, again, if somebody shows up in Beis Din with this document is good to go. Right? This document, now again, I will say there's still a concept of kiyum shtaros, certifying documents, but lamaisa, if we see something documentized, right, then ultimately, again, that attests to the veracity of the claim that is recorded in the document. So just by the way, just a fascinating machlokes. Right? Reuven, right? Shchimira comes over and says, Reuven owes me $1,000. So do we write up the shtar? The Meir says, yeah, because you can write up anything, because Beis Din knows when they see a shtar, that does not mean that this did or did not occur. There's a claim. Now the claim has to be vetted. Chacham say, no. We do not commit edim, do not write something down unless you absolutely know that the claim contained therein is a legitimate claim. So the Gemara says as follows: Amr Nachman, Amr Lihuna. So Rav Nachman said, Huna said to me, Tana, Meir Omer, Ein Kosvin, V'cham Om Kosvin. So Rav Nachman said that Huna said to him, just the opposite, or we switched the opinions. Rabbi Meir was the one who said Rabbi Meir is the one who said, that we can't write it down, and the Chum say we can write it down. Rabbi Meir says, even if you don't know, the Chum say, if you don't know that the claim is true, witnesses don't write it down. Rabbi Meir says, you can write it down. Rabbi Meir lo amar ela mishum Beis Din toed. And Rabbi Meir who said that you can't write it down, we'll say, what is Rabbi Meir concerned about? Rabbi Meir is concerned about a Beis Din who is not well versed in the halacha. In other words, Rabbi Meir in general, Rabbi Meir agrees, write it down. There's no harm in writing it down, because Beis Din knows that even when someone presents that document, you got to do the due diligence. Just because something is in a contract, just because something is in a document, doesn't automatically make it true. There needs to be some type of verification process. What are we concerned about? We're concerned about a Beis Din that may not be as versed in halacha. Both say sometimes you have it, right? You always have different layers, different levels of Beis Din. Remember again, sometimes you had communities where the Dayanim weren't as well versed. Could happen. So we're concerned that if Beis Din is not well versed and Beis Din sees a document, Beis Din will automatically assume that if something has been documentized, that it must be true. It must be true. And the Rav Dimi min Arda, Rav Dir Narda said, Hilchasa in Choshishin la Beis Din Toh. No, we're not concerned about that. We're not concerned about a Beis Din. No, we assume that a Beis Din is a reputable Beis Din. A Beis Din knows what it's doing, and therefore when a Beis Din sees a document show up, will understand you can't just assume that because something is written down, it's automatically true. Rather, again, this requires due diligence, it requires investigation, and that's Beis Din's job to ascertain the validity of the transaction recorded in the document. What about the following case of Rava? We don't perform chalitza unless, of course, we know the parties involved, right? We know the widow and her brother-in-law. And miyun, remember again, miyun is the process. If a brother or a mother marries off a minor daughter or sister, so it is a rabbinic marriage, but the girl has the ability to do miyun, which means to refuse the marriage and just to walk away. We don't do miyun, no get, no nothing. We don't do miyun unless, of course, you recognize the parties. Therefore, kosvin get chalitza, the get miyun v'afa b'shem ekir. Therefore, I will say, witnesses could write up a document saying chalitza was done or miyun was done, even though the witnesses do not recognize the parties involved. In other words, I will say, since Beis Din only does a chalitza if they know the parties, and Beis Din only does a miyun if they know the parties. Therefore, again, if Beis Din tells witnesses, guys, draw up a document, sign your names on it, that Ruvain did chalitza with Rachel, or that Rachel did miyun with Ruvain, and again, we could write it and we could sign it. And the witnesses don't know, right? Witnesses on the document don't know Rachel, they don't know Ruvain. It's okay. Because since Beis Din only does these processes, if they know the parties involved, you can write up a document. So the Gemara says, my time, why is that? La mishum dechoshin the Beis Din toin. Or is it not because we are concerned about a Beis Din toin? In other words, I will say that Allah Chalamaisa, we are concerned about the fact that Beis Din does make mistakes. To which the Gemara says, no, here's the difference. Lo, Beis Din achar, Beis Din lo daiki. I will say the concern is like this. When one Beis Din sees that something's been done by another Beis Din, they will not investigate that. Why? Because it's normal that Batei Din will go ahead and rely on one another. So if I'm in Beis Din B, and a document shows up to me from Beis Din A, then halacha l'maisa, again, I could rely on that. That's not going to be a problem. However, again, Beis Dina Basra Edim Daiki. But again, I will say, if a document is presented, and the document was not done by Beis Din, what was the document done by? Two witnesses, that absolutely Beis Din will investigate, and Beis Din will go ahead and look into that. So both Rabbi says, therefore, interestingly enough, the way we paskin in this particular case is that halacha l'maisa, we paskin ultimately again like Rabbi Meir, that you could record something in a document. In other words, so if Shemira says, record in a document that Reuven owes me $1,000, and he asks, Levi and Yehuda to go ahead and record that in the document, they could do so. What are they testifying to? What is the document testifying to? Well, so what is the document testifying to? That Shemira told us that Reuven owes him $1,000. Do they know that claim to be true? Do they know it to be true? No. What the document attests to is we're attesting to the fact that we're attesting to is what Shchiv Meira said to us, and we're putting this in a document, and they sign their names on a document. When that document comes before Beis Din knows all that document means is that there's a claim. It does not in any way attest to the validity of the claim, and therefore halacha l'maisa again, Beis Din now knows they need to do the investigation. So all it does in this case of the Shchimira is it allows the Yarshim to come with a claim in writing from their father. That's all it does. But it in no way gives them any strength of the claim. Beis Din will have to investigate it. So Beis Din understands in general when someone comes with a shtar, now again I will say, if you have a shtar that is certified by a Beis Din, that's called Kiyum Shtaras, that means something else. That's different. But you show up with a shtar, all the shtar says is that people are attesting that something occurred. It may or may not have occurred. Beis Din needs to do their due diligence. Also, we paskin in Beis Din Toin. I will say again, legal system only works if you have belief in it. So in other words, once we're going to say that Batei didn't make mistakes, then again it erodes the quality of the legal system. So therefore, as a halachic approach, we assume a Beis Din knows what to do. Now, by the way, do Batei didn't make mistakes? Of course, and that's why the halacha provides what happens when a Beis Din does make mistakes. Of course, but lamaisa, at the end of the day, the way the halacha operates is we assume operational integrity on part of the Beis Din. So therefore, we assume when Beis Din sees a shtar that shows up that Reuven and Shimon signed, that Shchimira told them that Yehuda owes them $1,000. Beis Din's not just going to say okay, right, and go ahead and allow them to collect, but rather Beis Din's going to do their due diligence. Right, so we'll say shkoyach. What a start to the week. Stop over here. Have a great day, everyone.